Welcome to Paper Crafter's Library. In this video, I'm going to show you how I created this relax card. Now this card is just jam-packed full of techniques. I'm going to demonstrate the kissing techniques when I stamp my son. I'm going to show you how to double emboss over a dye-based ink. I'm going to demonstrate the use of a positive and negative mask to sponge an ombre background. And then as I put this card together, you're also going to see the MISTI in action. So let's get started. So I'm working here on my MISTI. I have my lid opened, the foam mat in place, the grid paper on top. I have a scrap piece of my Simon Says Stamp 120-pound white cardstock centered on my MISTI, and then I have a magnet holding it in place in each corner. Now I'm going to be starting by using this Simon Says Stamp set called My Sunshine, and I want to use the sun. So what I'm going to do is, you can see here I have the sun image. I'm going to place it as centered on my cardstock piece. Then I'm going to close the lid of my MISTI and pick it up. So you want to make sure that the actual stamping surface is against the paper, because your MISTI is essentially acting like an acrylic block. Now it's a brand new stamp. I've never used it before, so it's kind of sticky. So I'm just going to move my magnets inwards a little bit because I was noticing that it was lifting my cardstock a little bit. Now I'm going to be stamping my son in the Simon Says Stamp Duckling ink. But before I do that, I want to use a technique called kissing. And for that, I'm going to be using my Simon Says Stamp Tiny Alphabet Background Stamp. Now here you can see what the stamp looks like. You can see it's this big, I think it's 6 by 6. And I have here my large Fiskars stamp press. So I want to position my stamp onto my Fiskars stamp press. To make sure it's straight on there. And then I'm going to keep that at the ready here. So first off, I'm going to take my Duckling ink and I'm going to press it all over my stamp. Next, I'm going to take my orange peel ink and I'm going to press it onto my Tiny Alphabet background stamp. And I'm just kind of pressing and twisting. I don't want there to be any harsh lines on there. You probably don't have to cover the whole, well, you don't have to cover the whole stamp, but I find it a little bit easier that way, that I know for sure that no matter where it aligns with my stamp, it'll be covered. Then I'm going to place this over top of, kind of trying to center it onto my sun, and then I'm going to press straight down and lift straight up. And that is what is called the kissing technique. Then I'm going to take my lid, I'm going to close it, and I'm going to press and stamp. So I just want to make sure now that this is thoroughly stamped. And then I'm going to lift it up, and you can see what a super cool pattern we now have on our sun. So now what I want to do before I move on to the next step, I'm going to keep my stamp in place on the lid of my MISTI. I'm not going to move my cardstock piece here, but I do want to clean off that stamp. So I'm going to grab a clean baby wipe here. Next, I'm going to take my Versamark ink pad and I'm going to press that all over my sun. And I want to make sure that my stamp is well covered. Then I'm going to take that and I'm going to once again close the lid, and it's going to stamp directly over top of my previously stamped image. And I may actually do that again one more time because I really want to make sure that there's a lot of Versamark on there. And as long as your paper doesn't shift, and the magnets are designed to keep that in place, and as long as your stamp doesn't shift, you can really stamp over it as many times as you want. So now I can see by looking at it that it's well covered in my embossing, or in my Versamark ink. So now I'm going to take my WOW regular clear embossing powder and I'm going to sprinkle it on top of my sun. I'm going to tap off the excess, and then I'm going to take this and I'm going to heat emboss it using my heat tool. Now while my embossing powder is still hot and wet, I'm going to quickly place this over top of my filter again and sprinkle on some more embossing powder. Now you have to do this quickly or your embossing powder won't stick. So I got it on about half of it, and I'll probably have to do the other half after I heat this. So this has now essentially been embossed with a double layer of embossing powder. So now what I want to do is I want to cut it out. Now here, this is going to be a straight edge, and what I'm probably going to do for that, because I want it to remain straighter than I could probably get by using my scissors, is I'm going to align this in on my paper trimmer, and I'm going to cut. And that way I know it's being cut straight across like so. For the remainder of my sun, I'm going to cut with my scissors, and I'm going to leave a tiny little bit of a border around the image. So I don't want too much, just a small amount. So I don't want to cut right up to the stamped lines. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to use my scissors, and I'm going to finish cutting this out, and then I'll be back. So next I have here a piece of masking paper. This is from Inkadinkado, and I have my Spellbinders Classic Edges 1 Edge Abilities, and I want to use this scallop edge die. So first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that my masking paper is aligned with my grid paper. And then I'm going to position my edge ability so that it is about 1 3/4 of an inch up from the bottom edge of my masking paper piece. Then I'm going to grab just a little bit of washi tape. This is an old washi tape that I no longer use. And I'm going to use that to hold my die in place. And then I'm going to run that through my Big Shot. So I'm back from my Big Shot, and you can now see I have 2 pieces of my masking paper that I have cut using my die. I'm going to go ahead and set my die aside. I'm going to take a 4 by 5 1/4 inch piece of my Simon Says Stamp 120-pound white cardstock, and I'm going to put some Dotto adhesive, which is a temporary removable adhesive, at the back, and that's simply going to hold it in place on my grid paper as I'm working. Now what I want to do is to create an ombre background, kind of giving the effect of the ocean. So I'm going to need both sides of my masking paper, the positive and the negative. So I'm going to start with the negative, and I'm going to remove the backing, and then I'm going to position this on my cardstock piece. Now, before I actually start sponging, what I like to do is kind of plan out how much of each color I want. So in this case, I want more. I'm going to be sponging in using 3 colors to create my ombre effect. Simon Says Sea Glass, Surf Blue. So Sea Glass here, Surf Blue, and Audrey Blue. And I'll bring those into view in a second. Surf Blue is the lightest, so I'm thinking that I want most of my card with the Surf Blue. So I'm probably going to do the bottom 2 inches. I'm just going to put a little mark here. And maybe the bottom 2 1/4 inches. Then so this line here. This is why I like having grid paper, because I can do this kind of thing very easily. Then I'm going to do 1 1/2 inches, and then the rest will be the darker color. So what I want to do is with this piece, I want to make sure that it's aligned. It's kind of centered, and it's aligned with the bottom tips with the 1 1/2 inch mark, and then I'm going to press that down. So that's going to stay in place. Then I'm going to take my lightest color, this is Sea Glass, and I have a mini ink blending tool. I think that's the wrong one. I have 1 per. I'm going to pounce it onto my ink pad, and then I'm going to start sponging off the cardstock, working in a circular motion onto the cardstock. So now you can see here that I have my color, and I want to very carefully remove this paper. I accidentally pulled up the corner here, but I think that's okay because I can probably go ahead and stick that down with a little glue. Just kind of lets me know that I have to really pull this off carefully. So you can see we have our first layer. So let me just go ahead and stick this corner down, and then we'll move on to our next layer. Now that shows up now, but it should be okay once we're all said and done with our color. So now I need to use both pieces of my mask. I'm going to use this bottom one here, and I'm going to put it slightly underneath so you can just see a hint of the blue over top, because I don't want there to be a white line in between the colors. Then I'm going to take this piece that I just finished using, and I'm once again going to line it up now with the next mark that I made. And then I'm going to take my second color. So this time I'm now using Surf Blue. Once again, I'm going to pounce my ink pad or my mini ink blending tool against my cardstock or against my grid paper, and then I'm going to start working in a circular motion onto my cardstock. Now I'm going to carefully remove this layer here. And there you can see I've built up my gradient. So now I don't need my top portion of my mask anymore. I just need this one here. Now I'm going to take my Audrey blue. So now if I once again go ahead and remove this, you can see what that looks like. Now, unfortunately, this did not, I guess the glue must have soaked in, so it now created a resist effect where it would not take my ink, unfortunately. But that's okay, because I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim that off, and I also think what I want to do is to create a little bit more of a ombre effect. So I'm going to use some of my same colors. So here you can see I'm going to take this piece now, and I'm going to put it at the bottom, like so. And then I'm going to take my top piece, and I'm going to lay this on top. And then I'm going to layer the same colors as I used before, but because I'm building additional layers, it's going to deepen the color. So it's almost like you're creating a bit of an intermediate color. So I'm going to start with my sea glass again. And if I go ahead and remove this, you can see, I'm going to remove this one as well. You can see I kind of ended up with this color in between. So now I want to do the same thing between this one and this one. I want to create another layer. So, and I think, because I like that Audrey blue, I think I'm going to apply some of that, but just not as dark as I had in the top layer. Kind of debated whether to use the Surf Blue again, but I find that a little bit of a dull blue compared to this Audrey. This is a really pretty blue. So I thought it might be nice to build that color up a little bit more. Oh, you know what? I'm not even using Audrey. I'm using Surf. How about that? Let's mix in a little Audrey. Kind of liven it up a little. I don't want to go too dark because we don't want to lose the effect of the top color. So now, let's go ahead with that. Take off our masks, and you can see we've created this really neat kind of an ombre effect. So here you can see I trimmed down my panel. So I took off that little white spot in the corner. So I took a 1/4 inch off. So this is now 5 inches high. And then I took 1/8 of an inch off on either side. So this is now 3 3/4 of an inch wide. So now I'm going to bring back my MISTI, and I'm going to sit this in the corner of my MISTI. And I'm going to use my magnets to hold it in place. I want to stamp the Relax sentiment from, this is the same My Sunshine stamp set. Now I have this tiny little smear of yellow. And I think that may have come from my fingers because I had previously used yellow to create my sun. So in order to block that off, I'm taking this relax stamp and I'm going to position my A on my relax image so that it covers that. And then this is kind of where I'm thinking of placing my sun. So that's probably a good height. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close the lid so that I can pick up my sentiment. And then I'm going to use my VersaFine Onyx Black ink. I like this ink because it is a nice, intense color of ink. So I'm going to ink up that stamp. And then I'm going to very carefully sprinkle on some embossing powder. And I'm just using that same clear embossing powder. Now I should have used my embossing buddy and I completely forgot. So I'm just going to have to clean that off a little bit better with a paintbrush and then I will be back. And then I'll heat emboss it as well. So now I have here a 3 7/8 by 5 1/8 inch piece of black cardstock. And I want to stick my panel onto my cardstock piece. And I finished embossing it already, in case you're wondering. I'll put some in the middle as well. There you can see how that looks. Now I want to take some dimensional foam and I want to stick my sun on there. And I'm probably going to cut a couple little pieces here too so I can get into a little bit into where the rays are. Then I'm going to go ahead and align the straight edges with the white edge or the edge of my white panel. And then because the sun already has dimension to it, I'm not going to pop it up anymore. Otherwise it might get a little bit too bulky to stick in an envelope. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick it down and I'm going to use some glue. So now my final step is going to be to add a few of these enamel dots. And I think what I want to do, so I'm going to pick the color in the center, which is closest to the orange that I used on my image, and I'm going to put one there. Not sure, that doesn't look good there. So I've embellished my card with a few enamel dots going from the sun down to the sentiment. So it kind of helps bring your eye downwards, but it's almost like, I think of it almost like a scattering of sunshine or sun rays coming downwards towards the relax. So there you can see how I created my card, and we're now finished.